All right, so here we are for a new episode of New Narratives, this time featuring Caley Alyssa, the CEO, founder of Caley Alyssa app, and the Academy of Yogic Sleep. Caley has been an industry leader in the wellness space for over 15 years, creating content for fitness giants like Alo Yoga, Beachbody, and Mindbodygreen. She launched her very own yoga app 3 years ago, which releases new on demand classes and meditations weekly. Caley also leads the Academy of Yogic Sleep, a revolutionary science backed certification program for yoga nidra, non sleep deep rest, bridging the modern with the mystical. Everything Caley shares with you comes from the heart, from what moves her. So I'm so glad to have you on. And so I met Caley back in 2020, right? Is that
Mhm.
before the pandemic? And we were on a yatra in Egypt and kind of became pretty quick soul friends and journeyers. And I've always really admired the way you approach both life and relationships. And so it's such an honor to have you on today to tell more about your story and your path with relationships and relating. And
Thank
so,
you.
is there anything you want to say before I dive into some questions?
And I'm excited to be here with you. I love you to bits, and I love the word that you use to describe our relationship. I definitely felt that with you.
Awesome.
Feel that with you.
So,
Feel, not felt.
yes,
Feel it
yes, feel
out.
ongoing. Beautiful. So, I guess we'll just start off by what is on your heart right now as it relates to your relationships, and are there questions that you're really sitting with and feel alive?
Yeah. Well, I became a mom 2.5 years ago. And I think for me, I look at relationships now very differently in terms of, we'll start with romantic relationships, but all relationships really. So my relationship with my partner, after becoming parents, you really learn how to shift the dynamic from being in a couple to being in a family. And that is a hard shift to make, no matter how wanted the children are, or child is. And so recently, the questions that I've been asking myself about relationship in terms of romantic relationship are really and truly, how can I feel more depth of connection in the mundane? And that translates to everything I do, into all my practices and my work with my clients. But how can we feel more present to the magic and the miracles of the day to day, and the there's this country music song. It's called Everyday Love. And I think of that song as I'm saying this to you, but it's about that. It's about, looking for the magical, precious moments in things like doing the dishes together, or cooking your meal, or, putting our daughter to sleep every night. And so that's where it is for me right now. And it's, how can I feel and experience more depth, more intimacy in these sort of like monotonous or, mundane daily tasks. Um, yeah. And then I can talk about, I guess, regular relationship outside of romance. But I think, if you're a parent and you're listening in, it's how your friendships shift when a child comes in is very clarifying. It's really interesting to see. Um, there was a moment where I was very, very like, put the hammer down on what and who I allow in my life post post baby. Once I had her, it became very clear what I was like. I don't need to mess with that energy anymore. It's a waste of my time, and I don't want it around my daughter. And so now, the question that I ask myself in terms of friendships and other types of relationships in my life is, what energy do I want to be around, and who is inspiring me, and who do I want my daughter to, through osmosis, learn from and become like and be formed by, and how her soul really formed by. Um, and so those are the questions I look at, and I'm kind of playing with in my personal life right now in terms of my friendships and other relationships.
It's really beautiful to think of being a parent almost like a clarifying mechanism of like whose energy do you really want to be immersed in and also like passed on and influencing this precious being that you are protective of and bringing into the world. I
Isn't
was
that
curious
funny?
what
We don't do it for ourselves without the child. It takes the
thinking.
child coming in to be like, oh, I was tolerating that. I'm not doing that anymore.
Right. Like it was
Yeah.
fine enough for me, but now I'm realizing it's actually not anymore.
Right.
So enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really profound. And I'm curious about what you were talking about in your partnership and this kind of focus on the mundane. Was there something specific that like gave rise to that awareness or that intention? Like what made that become so important to you
Mhm.
all of a sudden or now?
I love that question. I think a lot of people listening can identify with being in not that way, right? Like in a tumultuous, dramatic, passionate experience with another partner where it's anything but mundane, right? We've all been there at some point in our lives, and I was there for about 5 years, um, and so I know that part of me was afraid to find a relationship that was stable because I thought that it would be boring. I thought it would be, not satisfying. And what's interesting is that now I'm on the other side of this, and I have found a very stable, very trustworthy, very loving relationship with my partner. It's it's a calming of the nervous system. It's literally a resetting of the nervous system because I got addicted to these super high highs and these super low lows and riding the waves of that. It's exciting, it's depressing, it's exciting, it's depressing, it's passionate, it's always passionate, one way or the other. And that is addictive because we're constantly getting these hits of dopamine and I was in this excited state, this frenetic, excited state, and I got addicted to that. And I couldn't see how being in a relationship that was more stable, where the waves are just kind of like this. Now, every now and again we have a spike or a dip, but it's more of that like gentle roll. I couldn't see how that wouldn't be boring. And now on the other side of it, it's this experience of having such a trust and such a um, level playing field with my partner that can create the grounds for an intimacy like I've never known. I, I and that's in all realms. Like the intimacy that I've created and cultivated with my partner and the trust that we have um, has freed me to be and do who I want to be and how I want to do my life in so many ways. And the level that I can reach with my partner currently is well beyond the dramatic highs and lows, that I had with my ex. It's a different kind of intensity. It's a different kind of experience, and it's much richer. It comes from a place that's like love, and it's not the addiction. It's not the ups and the downs that motivate my actions anymore, which is every now and again. I've refined quite a bit, but every now and again I catch myself being like, I'm doing that thing. I'm
Mm,
creating drama for no reason.
that's really beautiful. Well, okay, I have two questions on that. When you notice the part of you that goes to create the drama, like how can you tell? Like, how can you tell that that's happening? Because I'm sure
Mhm.
everyone does that in some way. Like, what are your signs of like, uh-oh, we need to slow it down here?
Yeah. I know when I get really like when I'm in my stubborn like I am rightness, that's when I'm like, oh, I'm like I'm just wanting to be right. I'm just wanting to argue right now because I'm bored or I'm frustrated at something where I haven't felt like I've been heard about something. And my motivation is just to argue. It's not to have a conversation. It's not to resolve. I just want to fight. I just want to verbally spar. And that's my indicator that's, big red flag. Big red flag.
What I love about how you talk about this is I'm hearing like simultaneously with the awareness of self-care that there's like a self-love that's like, yes, I'm going to do this at times and like kind of kick up the dust and like make a mess. And, there isn't kind of those layers of like, oh, that's really bad that I do it. It's just like, okay, we're going to adjust course. And so I'm curious just about that and what it's like for you when you're in those spaces, if it actually feels like self-loving awareness or like if there's a process you have to go through to regulate and relate to yourself kindly when you're there.
Both at different times, I think. I have to self-regulate. I have a very deep and rich history of rage, not even anger, but beyond anger, rage. And that was something I experienced at a very young age, and I've had to really work through these past, I would say, this past decade of my life. I wasn't really aware of the problem until about a decade ago. And so sometimes my rage takes over, and it's really challenging to cool and to calm myself down so that I can have a productive conversation or resolve an issue or be empathetic towards my partner. And in those instances, I have to remove myself. And this has been a dance for my current partner and I, because he has sort of this abandonment wound. And so when I'm in a place where I know that I'm activated, and if I don't remove myself, I'm gonna rage all over him. I gotta go. And for him, that's like, ooh, no, she's leaving, she's abandoning. And so he approaches and I then explode. And so that dynamic is still present sometimes. And we now know it, and we can see it when it's happening. And one of us can call it and be like, oh, we're in that space. We got to take a 5-minute timeout. And when there's a time frame associated with our timeout, like I'm not just leaving indefinitely, I'm not just walking off and never going to come back. But when we make like we're going to meet in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour or whatever here at this time, then it lessens that sense of I'm being abandoned, and then we can come back together. Now, if you're still not ready at that time, we text and like, hey, I need a few more minutes. I still want to, punch your face with a chair hard or whatever the thing is. But, there are those times when I can catch myself in the moment, and I'm getting much better at it. I think truly now, like in this time, in the age of Aquarius, when we're moving to all of this technology and information, and our teacher, actually, Guru Jagat, used to say this, the people that can sift and sort through all of the information out there and make sense of it and then translate that to others are the people who will be successful during this time. And I think our emotions and the information we get from our emotions is truly where our intelligence lies. And the people in this day and age who can master their emotions and sift and sort through their emotional field and decide what's theirs, what's not theirs, how to process, how to move forward, all of those things, I think that's the thing that's going to set people who are successful. And really, what does success mean? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the people who thrive in this life and are satisfied in this lifetime are the people who can master their emotions. Man, I'm not there yet, but it is a goal, and I'm working on it. And sometimes I can catch myself, and those times I celebrate and I'm like, did you see what I just did there? I celebrate with my partner. I'm like, yes, can you give me a little like encouragement here? Because man, I just saved us from falling in a massive pothole of shit,
Yeah, I love that, like, being on the same team about the humanity in it, just like, "Okay, this is a big ditch that we could have fallen in, and I did not fall in, so let's celebrate that." And one of the things that you're making me think about, which is going back to how you were talking about trust, that you built this trust over time to really go so much deeper, and it doesn't look as, like, high and low and up and down, but it's like a smoother path that still
Mhm.
has will have some peaks and, of course, dips. And I'm curious about the role of trust and, like, is that how much of that is a self-trust thing and the way you're able to be in relationship to your emotions, and how much of it is a relational trust thing, and how would you talk about that?
I love how fine-tuned you are, and going back to that because there's a lot there, and I love that you picked up on that. And I think a lot of people out there pick up on that and will pick up on that and want to know about that too, right? We've all explored and experienced relationships where we don't feel like we were safe, where there were trust issues, and that is destabilizing. And it makes you, when we're in those types of relationships and experiences, what we're doing is we're suppressing our intuition, we're suppressing our wisdom, our inner knowing, and we're staying in something that intuitively we know is not right, but we're experiencing it because we feel like maybe it could be right. We're in love with the potential of it, or the potential of them, or the potential of the union, what it could be, but not currently what it is. And so when we find ourselves in that space, we lose trust in ourselves because we suppress, we're not listening to ourselves. Not only do we not trust our partner or partners or whatever the experience is, we don't trust ourselves because we're with them. We're staying with them. And so that's a nasty cycle. And I got caught up in that cycle for quite a long time. And there were moments where I just knew I wasn't, where I was supposed to be or who I was supposed to be with. But I basically was like, shh, quiet. like suppressing and just because it was exciting and this, all these things I was feeling, and I'm a Scorpio and I want to feel intensely. And, you know, and so that can be a scary place. And so I learned in that 5 year relationship I was in, I wasn't trusting myself. Not only was I definitely not trusting my partner, I was not trusting myself. And so when I started to realize that, and also that I wasn't really in love with what I was thinking about or dreaming about what could be, that's when I was like, okay, it's time to align some stuff here and really start to like hone in on my intuition and my inner knowing and my voice. What do I want? What do I need? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? What's okay? What's not okay? And all of those questions start to surface up, and I started to pay attention to them, whereas before I just had blinders on.
Yeah, and it makes me think back to what you were kind of describing out of the gate of really falling in love with the details and the minutia of the present moment versus like having such a sight on the future or projecting outward into some distant possibility. And so just kind of recognizing the relationship between that active practice you're doing now with that and how that actually supports some of the trust with yourself that you're talking to. And I would be curious to hear your perspective on the role of having a relationship with the future in a way that is like generative and purposeful versus where we can slip into that kind of fantasy realm or seeing potential before it's actualized and then not actually being in relationship to reality. So curious how you hold your
Mhm.
dreams, your vision, your purpose alongside of like that really deep moment to moment presence.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think, we can all idealize our partners. And I think when we do that the most is when we break up with them, you know? We break up and we're like, "Oh, but they were so good and all of these things." And we sort of like we have our rose-colored glasses on. And I know we've all been there at some point in our life and experienced that idealization of the partner in that way. And I think I think honestly what it comes down to in terms of um, being present to what is and not so much being obsessive or like completely taken over by the future, and yet balance of having a vision for a future is doing that in your union. So what I've experienced with my current partner is we didn't just like come together and start dating and having fun and then it just led to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, in the beginning, maybe that was a part of it. However, we actually discussed our vision for our coupleship, our union. What did we want in the future? Where are we heading? What's our path? What's our trajectory? And how are we getting there? And how is that, how are we working together to get there? Now, that being said, we've had to reassess a few times. We've been together 5 years, and we've had to reassess. And I recommend doing this like maybe every 6 months or maybe every quarter, but having a sit down with your partner, maybe over a romantic dinner or something like that, where you can go through, hey, are we still aligned with our vision? Are we both still wanting this vision? Are we still aligned and on the path towards this vision? Or are we getting derailed somewhere? Or has the vision changed in some way? And I think when we can do that, then it's less obsessive or like idealizing what the future might be. It's more co-creating and collaborative. And it creates, again, that trust. And also it's exciting. It's, to plan with your partner in that way is meaningful and intentional. And and it can feel like maybe mundane or boring, but really it's like a structure that holds you. It's a foundational structure. And when we lack that foundation, we lack that structure, then we're just building. It's like a Jenga puzzle. We're building on something wobbly and shaky and it's going to fall, And so I highly recommend, if you haven't done that kind of a sit down with your partner, it's time. It's time to do it.
So like the difference between having a bunch of ideas in your mind as to where life will go and like actually being in a creative dialogue and making sure that you share kind of a similar dream for what your
Mm-hmm.
lives will hold. And have you run into instances where you want different things yet? Like has that come up? And if so, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So we had this one experience where I'm looking this way because it was out there in our yard. And I don't think my partner will mind if I share this, because we've talked about it openly with many people. I found some nicotine gum in his car, in his truck, and I wasn't aware that he was chewing nicotine gum, and he hadn't shared that with me. And I found quite a few nicotine gum packages, and when I approached him about it, he was very dismissive and nonchalant. It was sort of like, well, now you know. And so my rage wanted to come out, and I did not let it. And I told him, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. I'll be back in an hour. I did not like your response. And I'm going to go work this energy off. So I went for a walk, and I actually put on a Paul Selig podcast, or I don't know, some recording or something from Paul Selig. If you don't know who Paul Selig is, he channels what's called the guides. It's a collectivist souls. It's very much like Abraham Hicks, something like that. But the way he channels is really interesting. So you got to listen to him live if you haven't. Anyway, I was listening to a thing, and someone in the crowd asked him about smoking, or somehow he brought up nicotine in this. And I've never heard him talk about it before. But of course, in this one thing that I was listening to for 30 minutes on my walk, it was talking about nicotine addiction. Now, what he said was, who am I to judge if nicotine is on someone's path towards bringing them to a higher order? Who am I to judge? Maybe nicotine helps them access the divine, become closer to God, be a better human. I don't know. And maybe it doesn't. That's for them to decide. And what rang a bell in my head at that time was, oh, I don't care that he's chewing nicotine gum. I could care less, actually. What I care about is, I thought we were aligned on this mission together. I thought we were on this trajectory and this path together. But this, to me, in my opinion, seems low vibe and low energy. And the hiding it is a low vibe, low energy. And that is not aligned with this path and this mission that we're on. And when that clarity came through, I turned my butt right around and I started walking home, because I knew exactly what I needed to say to him. And it was that, I don't care that you're chewing nicotine gum. I care that you didn't tell me, that you didn't feel you could tell me. And that we're on this path that we decided that we're on together. And this feels like, to me, a derailment of that mission. And when I could communicate from that place, he softened like butter. And we could have a conversation. It was very productive and very loving, and less defensive and activated,
Yeah.
and finger pointing, or like, oh, I was caught, whatever the dynamic is. So yeah, I think that experience sort of encapsulates the question you were asking me. And yeah.
So beautiful. I also just love that when there's this like really sincere heart led desire to show up to relationship from a place of clarity, like you went and took the walk and you're like, I'm going to try to just like change my relationship to this thing and put on this podcast, and like there you are, like your answer is just like right there
Right
to
there.
support you. And like the power in that, just that you like opened to support, and there it was, and then could come back and have reconnection in a really meaningful way. I think that's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Those are those hyper synchronicities, that's the language of destiny. And that's when we know we're connected and we're on our path.
Yes. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that actually, because I think it's rare to have kind of like a public dialogue about these moments. And I think people experience them all the time, these synchronicities. And so I'm curious the relationship that you have with synchronicities and the way that you make choices in relationship to them, and how you navigate with that part of your life.
Hmm. Yeah. In terms of synchronicities, I think we have to have our eyes open to see them, because they're happening all the time, in between every moment, everywhere. And so having our eyes open to see, and that, it's really, I'm going to use an example from the Bible, which is, I was raised Christian and I left the religion. And I recently have been listening to and attending, there's a church in our neighborhood that I went to a service around community, and everything they said really sparked something within me. And so I've been taking sort of my bits and pieces from learnings and going back to my roots in that way, and still not identifying with being religious or being any, the dogma around religion or any of that, but source and spirit and God, or however you want to call it. But there is this story that is reminding me of what it means to see. And it's in the Bible when there's a burning bush and God is like in this bush burning and he's waiting for someone, to see him and to see this burning bush. And what happens, there's a shepherd, and it's like this shepherd could have walked by this burning bush. His name is Moses. He could have walked by it and not seen it 1,000 times. We don't know. And in the Bible, it sort of reads like God was just content to sit in this bush and burn until somebody noticed him, and which is really wild. But Moses had the eyes to see it. He saw what probably thousands of other shepherds would have just passed by, and because he was tuned into it, and so opening our eyes to see really means being aligned internally and using the practices like Kundalini or Yoga Nidra or whatever the practices are that help us to feel like we are aligned in some way and connected to something bigger in some way. And then we start to notice the synchronicities out there. I was speaking to the founder last night of Neurovisor, this amazing light, and it's a psychedelic experience without any kind of ingesting of drugs. It's a purely natural psychedelic experience with light and sound. And what he was saying is that there's this fourth state deficiency syndrome. We have 4 states of consciousness, and we have this syndrome in the West, at least in our society here in America, where people are not tapping into that 4th state of consciousness. We're not giving ourselves space throughout the day to do it, or week or month to do it. It's just going every day with what's being thrown at us. And Joe Dispenza talks about this too, waking up and making it intentional, your practice intentional, because if you do the same thing every day, you're going to get the same results that you're getting. And if you want to change your life, then you have to change your actions, and you have to change your mind in order to change your actions. And so everyone says it in different ways, but this 4th state deficiency syndrome of our like consciousness is really contributing to a lack of us feeling connected, us feeling tuned into, us being able to see those burning bushes, and so asking ourselves, like, how many of these burning bushes are we passing by on a daily basis without even noticing them? Because they're there, and I don't know. I'm playing with this right now in my own life. I'm by no means a master at noticing these hypersynchronicities, but I am trying to see them more. And I do have a little journal or a note section in my phone. I'll write down when I do notice something, like if I get the perfect parking spot that I needed that day and I was calling it in and there it is, or whatever. A hummingbird lands on our front porch right in my face and I get to interact with it and the beauty of it. Animals hold a lot of intelligence and connected wisdom as well. And so, being aware to which animals you're noticing, what's showing up in your field, and that can be powerful too.
Mm-hmm. Just like looking for the themes and patterns. And I think also going back to what you were saying earlier with just the nuance and details, like that's the practice that you're taking up. And so I I also think there's a relationship between like our curiosity and like the questions we're holding and then the answers that we get to discover. And the same way that in a way you didn't pose a direct question about the nicotine gum, but yet your consciousness was kind of holding this like, how can I come back into connection in some way, and received the answer. And so I guess, through that
Curiosity is
lens,
key.
yeah, that curiosity, like,
Yeah.
are there things I'm curious right now, like what are some things you're really curious about that you just are holding open questions around that you are allowing answers to kind of come through in life?
Yeah. Well, with that example, I wasn't curious at first, like with that example with my partner, I was like finger pointing, like, what is this? And of course he was defensive. I'm like, well, now, like, and so it took me a minute to get into that. Oh, I'm curious. Why didn't he feel safe? He could share this with me. Why, all of those things. And so curiosity really is truly a connector in relationship, whether it's romantic or not, when you can be curious or even empathetic, like Brene Brown talks about empathy versus sympathy. Empathy is when we can really connect and feel what the other person's feeling based on some past felt experience from our own lives, rather than being sympathetic. It's like, yeah, that sucks. You're down there, man. At least you didn't, whatever the thing is. So yeah, I think the curiosity is powerful. And in terms of what I'm curious about right now, what I'm experiencing in my own life is I had many years of taking advantage of my body and my body's ability to do things like cool back bends, or, putting my toes on my nose in a handstand, stuff that doesn't matter. But I did it because I was being paid great money to do it. And I got to travel to some really cool places to do it and so now my body's, I've discovered a lot of different things that are going on in my body that were because of 8 to 10 years of this intense back bending and really austere conditions, like, on the top of Tahoe in a sports bra in the snow on a white slippery board with someone else balancing on top of me, so all of these factors that at the time intuitively I was like, this probably can't be good for me, but how cool, look where I am and who I'm with and what I'm doing. And so that ego part of me took over for a long time and sort of, again, diminished my body's communication with me, my body telling me this wasn't good, this didn't feel right, there was a pain here, something going on there. So what I'm curious about now is really two things. One is rest as a rebellion, rest as a radical rebellion, spaciousness and slowing down. I'm very curious about what that has to offer me. And I've been exploring with, in that regard, I've been exploring with when I go for walks, not listening to a podcast, taking these out, listening to the sound of the birds and the wind and whatever else is happening, literally not constantly filling my head with stuff, music on in my house at every moment, podcasts at every moment, at the gym, all of the stuff that I fill my head with on a daily basis. I've been taking it out recently and just trying to be. It's like Laffy Taffy. I'm like imagining this stretching right now as I'm saying that, like this gooey, spacious stretching, and in that also the rest, the slowing down, instead of the charge, the like taking a nap in the middle of the day. I used to identify with, I'm not a good napper, and now I'm like, I can rest if I create the conditions for my body to rest, and my body will rest if I give it the space to. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I'm playing with on top of the rest and the spaciousness then is the healing aspect. What am I possible? What is possible for me to heal in my body? How powerful am I really? How much change can I affect in the physical structure and the alchemy of all of the cells of my body? And it's like a test almost. I've touted this information based on the wisdom body for so many years, but now I'm being given the opportunity to actually prove it with the physical body and the energetic body, and to see what I'm capable of, to see what our bodies are capable of. And so I'm curious now about that, about the healing and regenerative powers of my body. If I give it the space to rest, if I give it the space to heal, what am I capable of? What's possible? And I guess because of those two things, like underneath that or above it, the umbrella is like paying attention to my body. And I had to first learn the lesson to pay attention to my intuition and a past relationship, what was good for me and wasn't. And now I'm learning like, how do I pay attention to me for me? And so it's a new journey to be on. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's really powerful and beautiful. And I'm curious if there are any edges you're meeting as you open to these big questions and are kind of exploring and like really repatterning in a lot of ways, like ways that you've been doing things and now you're shifting gears. Like, what edges are you meeting, whether they are relational edges or just personal edges, as you are stepping into new ways of being in two pretty big ways?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I'm a Scorpio sun. And so in my life, there's this pattern of like birth, life, death, rebirth, transformation, 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 always a never ending, right? And so I find myself in that space continuously of this experience. And the edges are, it's an ego death, continual ego death. It's a continuous shedding of the layers of who I thought I was and learning who I am. I'm very much still learning, but being an easy student, learning also how to be an easy student. But honestly, it's the complete and continuous deaths, ego deaths, over and over again. And the first was becoming a mother. That was the first. The second was leaving LA and moving up to Portland and not being in the industry that I was in before and getting all of these left, right, and center things given to me, handed on a silver platter. And now it's like, slowly peeling back my sponsorships, my partnerships, all of these things, and like tearing them down one by one, And it's every time it's a death, every time it's a mourning, every time it's a loss, but also a celebration, because I'm taking the things away that aren't me and that were never me and that never really felt great underneath it all. And I'm stepping into what does, but it's still a mourning of that version of me and that experience of who I was in that part of my life and that time, right? So I think the edges are really like allowing myself to be sad and to mourn those parts of me that have gone or that are going and they're about to leave. And not feeling bad that I'm sad about it, and then allowing myself to celebrate, and sometimes forcing myself to celebrate, um, who I am becoming and the newness of it. It's uncomfortable for me.
It's really beautiful. I think you're touching on something so essential that I don't think in our kind of modern Western culture we're really taught, which is how to actually grieve and mourn. And um, yeah, like what are some things that you're doing for yourself to support that practice of actually grieving and, yeah, like allowing yourself to shed? And is that something that you're doing in isolation, or are you inviting other people in to support you? What is that looking like?
This is a growth edge for me, is inviting other people in to support me. I am very much so an isolationist. When something is off or wrong, I isolate. I go in and I process and try to move through it independently. And this has become a new edge for me, is actively seeking and engaging in the relationships that I feel supported by and that are there for my growth, for my greatest and highest good, not to placate me or, give me accolades or stroke my ego. The types of relationships who are really there for my growth, and that's been hard too. I'm not good at reaching out in that way. I'm not good at saying, "Hey, this thing's going on," because for me, I feel like, or have felt like in the past, that it's a complaining and it's a negative energy. Um, and so I'm like, I don't want to spread that negativity, and I don't want to complain, and I don't want to be, and I have to set that down, because again, I think that's coming from ego in some distorted way. It's a like it's an egotistical act, because I don't want to share all of me. I'm sharing a part of me, and the good part of me, so that people see me in the good way, right?
Yeah.
And that's maybe one edge of it. There's probably a lot of different edges, but that's one. Um, yeah. So I think, I don't know. I think it's that, just leaning more into my community at this stage of my life, my friends, and truly like trying not to do this alone, trying to process more with others. And when I do it alone, I let myself cry. I walk around outside a lot. We have a lot of good hikes here in Portland, and I'll just cry. Sometimes I get a little loud when I cry, so I try to do it not in my neighborhood, to let the energy move. But yeah, right now I think I'm trying to lean more into processing with others.
Yeah. And I think you're pointing to a deeply shared experience with a lot of people, that I think there's so much systemic conditioning that we have to do it alone, and that this kind of that it's like almost shameful to ask for help, or that we don't want to place the burden on someone else, or we don't want to spread negativity like you're saying. But I think, to your point, we are blocking our opportunities for really deep intimacy, is what you're discovering. And I think there's so much wisdom in that in order to have satisfying intimacy, it's like being held and with all of our parts, the parts that are falling apart and grieving and feeling like I have no idea what's going on, and yet some part of me has an idea of what's going on, and then the parts that are really shiny and like have it together, and like it's that type of intimacy takes a lot of rigor to like fully step
Mhm.
into and open to. Yeah. And I think it also comes back to like what you were saying very, very early in our conversation around trust. And like the more you can trust yourself, I think the more um, possible it is to access that kind of intimacy as well.
Yeah. I was writing a nidra the other day, and one of the like things that inspire me, or when I go to write nidras, I'll look up, like different scientific experiments or things like that. And I came across this quote that sort of hit home for me, and it's by this Nobel Prize winning chemist, and his name is Ilya. I'm going to butcher the last name, but it's like Prigogine or something like that. Um, but the quote was, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system into a higher order, something like that. But I think about that now, like I can be a small island of coherence, and yet like this is a theme obviously in the Aquarian age and everything that we're heading into, but it's like how can I feel more connected to the other islands out there who are also coherent, and then how can we amplify and like support each other? It's also this dream, like I want to be more in community in all ways. I like having a baby and moving to Portland, it felt very isolating, and seeing how people do family is so not what I want. It's so isolating and it's so challenging, and like not only do I want to be an island of coherence with my friends and be more in like resonance with them, but I want to have that like in my day-to-day, in my life, in my community. And I want Sunny to grow up like that, in that way. And it's not how our societies, we're not set up to do that. Um, that's challenging. I'm coming up against that right now.
Yeah, well, I know we have a couple minutes left, and this is a really big thing I wanted to ask you about, which is kind of how your ideas that you initially had about family and relationship and how that has now shifted in terms of what you actually want and how you want to do it differently. Like, can you talk to us about
Mm,
what you do want and what you see as possible and what is shifting and changing for you?
yeah. Well, I know with my current partner that anything is possible, which is really exciting. um to be in a relationship where all parts of me are like accepted and loved, and not only that but celebrated, and I could say I want to do X, Y, and Z, and he'd be like, all right, let's make it happen. It's just I finally have that, and I hope that everyone has that experience where you can just be really truly like 1,000% who you are on the table, and that it's like, all right, it's accepted and protected and celebrated. um so that's pretty fantastical. And in terms of relationship and what I see is possible, like I said, I mean, anything, I feel like I'm in a place where anything, sky is the limit. And, and in terms of not my romantic relationship, but relationship and community, community is becoming a focal point for me. I was asked what my purpose is, what my mission is for this lifetime. And before I could have said a pretty good elevator speech about like helping people to be happier, healthier in their bodies, and in fact, like making an impact on the world in some way. But I see now that my mission is not mine. I had this amazing breath wave experience about a month ago, maybe two now, but it very clearly like showed me that my mission is, it's a we and it's a collective and it's a us and ours. And I still don't know what that looks like. I'm trying to figure that out in many ways, but community is a huge focus of what I'm doing now. And I just started a group called the Luminary Path, and it's an embodied community of service. Um, I truly believe that I need to figure out what ways I can sacrifice more in my life. Sacrifice for others, sacrifice for the greater good, because I think that when we get into practice of not sacrificing, and when we do things that are convenient or fit into our lives in the way we want them to, we never become uncomfortable, and discomfort is important for our growth. And sacrifice is giving up something for the greater good, for the collective, for the coherence, for the greater resonance, whatever you want to call it. That is what needs to happen right now. That is what we all need to be doing right now. And I find the people that need to be doing it the most are the ones that are not. And that has been me for a long time. I talk about it, but really, like, what am I sacrificing, and how am I contributing, and how am I being of service? Not just being paid to be of service, but what are the ways I'm being of service that I'm not being paid and compensated for? So that's my next growth edge. That's my next step into this like exploration of community, sacrifice, service. What does that look like in my life? And I don't quite know yet, but I know anything is possible.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love how you articulated that. And are there any have there been any seeds planted? Like, it sounds like this is like definitely the next edge and you're working it, and you like this came to you in like a pretty big way in a recent
Mhm.
experience, a breath experience, and feeling into the we versus the me, and having the sense of what it is, but not exactly yet how it will express, and feeling in your heart this, I could feel the fire in you that wants to be of service and is being of service, but like wants to push it to the next edge of like getting out of comfort zone and
Mhm.
giving more and sacrifice. And um, has anything sparked you, or have you seen examples yet that you're like curious about, or is it still just brand new seed and just needing some watering?
Yeah, there's definitely things locally that I'm aware of. Like the houseless population in Portland is extremely high, and there's a lot of need in terms of help and support there. But I don't want it to be something that I'm doing just to do because it needs doing. I really want to feel connected to the thing I'm doing, and I want to feel like there's a why for me behind it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm seeking out what that is. There's lots of things that are right in front of my eyes that I could jump into. So right now I'm questioning what is the thing or are the things. And I do that by sharing with you in this platform and by sharing with other people where I'm at. And so I hope that someone out there might be listening and they're like, and reach out to me
Yes.
if you hear, if you know
Yes.
something. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm being curious. I'm having curiosity around this and seeing what unfolds and what presents itself to me.
Yeah, I love it. You telepathically like took it right out of my mouth. I was going to say, if we open this up and if people are interested to share with you, we can post
Hmm.
links to the best way to get in touch, um, how they can share with different opportunities and see what gets sparked.
Yeah, yeah. More and more, I'm thinking it's probably something having to do with children, now that I'm a mom. And, um, you know, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Okay, amazing. Well, so we are just about up on time. Is there anything else top of heart that you want to just share with our listeners? Maybe like one piece of wisdom that's really alive for you, or anything else
Mm.
you want to share?
One story, I guess, before we go. This experience I had, I think I was on a Manduka photo shoot in Palm Springs or something like that. And I shared this before many times. So if you're listening, you've heard it, hear it again. It's important. I was driving in a car, and this man, his name is Rand, was asking me questions about my relationship. And he asked me these questions that stuck with me. And I actually painted them on my wall in my house in Venice when I was living in California. And since then, they're not anywhere currently in my house here in Portland, but since then they have stuck with me and imprinted in my brain. And the questions were, I'll share them with you now. The first one was, does it limit or liberate you? And the second was, does it raise or reduce your energy?
Wow. I love both of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
those are so, I mean, for literally anything.
And it's so simple, but we forget to ask ourselves those questions. And when we hear it, it's just like, yeah.
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much. So, what's the best way, and I'll put this all in the YouTube notes, but for people to connect with you, learn more about the Yogic Academy for Sleep, the Luminary Path, the Caley Alyssa app, etc., what are the best ways we can get in touch with you?
It's all my name. So you can go to my website, it's caleyAlyssa.com. So is my Instagram. The app is also Caley Alyssa app. And then all the information for Luminary Path and the app are on my website, and as is the Academy of Yogic Sleep. And we're about to launch our fourth cohort for that. And I think we're going to be partnering with Neurovisor, which is the light and sound psychedelic experience I mentioned. So we're currently working on choreographing, if you will, music to the nidras that I've recorded, and that will be an offering for the next round of training, which will be pretty impactful, which I'm really excited about. So check out academyofyogicsleep.org and yeah, see what we're doing.
So beautiful. Yeah, and I've done nidras with Kaylee, and they're just absolutely, in terms of accessing deeper parts of consciousness and self, really, really profound ways to get in touch with what's beneath the surface of the mind. So, highly
I didn't know you
recommend.
had done my nidras. That's exciting.
Yeah. Yes, I've done recorded ones and I did the live one with you.
Oh, that's right. You did the one in person here in Portland.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah,
forgot. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure having you on here. And I'm going to pause our recording.
Okay.